Who would believe that one of the greatest minds in automobile industry started out as a farmer? The intriguing story of Henry Ford proves that anything is possible if you can only dream and stay focused on achieving your goals. How did the young farmer boy invent Ford? What is the current status of the company today? Stay tuned and ensure you watch till the end to find out. Henry Ford was born to William and Mary Ford on July 30, 1863. His family was involved in farming in Greenfield, Detroit, Michigan. At an early age, Ford had a special interest in old machinery, which was not common with other children that belonged to his age group. Henry was expelled from school due to his restlessness and mischief, and the attitude of Ford towards his studies became worse after his mother died in 1875. This must have been his own way of dealing with grief. However, his passion for instruments grew. At the age of 15, Henry enjoyed disassembling his father's watch and then fixing it back again. A year later, Henry left home to work as a mechanic in Detroit City. He returned home in 1882 and worked for 3 years on the family farm. During this period, he continued working on the Detroit factories, helping to operate and service the steam engines. Henry was later hired by the Westinghouse Steam Engine Company. In 1888, he married Clara Bryant, who had grown up on a nearby farm. In the first several years of their marriage, Ford supported himself and his new wife by running a sawmill. He later moved back with his wife to Detroit City. Henry worked night shifts in Edison's Edison Lighting Company and practiced automobile engineering during the day. In 1893, he was promoted to the level of a chief engineer. Around the same time, Clara gave birth to the couple's only son, Edsel Bryan Ford. Using the knowledge gained from the lighting company, Henry built a gasoline-powered car. While working at the company, Henry was also inspired by Thomas Alva Edison. However, some other issues forced him to leave the idea. He then went on to build the Ford Quadricycle in 1896, which consisted of a light metal frame fitted with 4 bicycle wheels and powered by a 2-cylinder, 4-horsepower gasoline engine. This quadricycle started as Henry's revolution as an automotive inventor. The other cars that he would produce were made using the experience he got from the quadricycle. And the next car that he built in 1898 was inspired by Edison. One of the major challenges faced by Henry was the commercial aspect of the automobile industry. His first attempt at establishing a company, the Detroit Motor Company, went bankrupt in 18 months. Driven by the passion to produce more affordable cars, Henry designed a 26-horsepower car in 1901. 2 years later, the automobile company was relaunched as Ford Motor Company. His second attempt, the Henry Ford Company, still exists today, but it was renamed Cadillac after Ford himself left early on. But the third time was a massive success, and in 1903, the modern Ford Motor Company was founded. When this new company yielded profits, Henry took advantage of the success and built a new plant in Ontario, Canada, to serve both Canadians and the British Empire. The cars produced by Ford Motors, Model T and Model A, are famous for making automobiles available to the common man. The Model T, also known as Tin Lizzie, was launched in 1908. In an attempt to meet the demands of the buyers, Ford started practicing techniques of mass production. This included the use of large production plants, standardized, interchangeable parts, and the world's first moving assembly line for cars. This helped to reduce the cost of producing an automobile. The more Ford increased production, the more the demand for Tin Lizzie spiked. As at 1918, almost half of the cars in America were Model Ts. In 1927, Ford started making automobiles on his plant located at the banks of the River Rouge in Dearborn, Michigan. He also launched an improved version of the Model T, which was the Model A. By this time, the company had grown to become the largest automobile company in the world. it had a record of producing over 15 million Model Ts. Ford had open plants and operations throughout the world. The Model A wasn't quite as successful as Model T. Ford stopped producing it in 1931, and in 1932, Ford released the first V8 engine. This model did not get much sales because Ford was no longer as famous as it was initially. The company was now at the number 3 spot in terms of sales of automobiles. In 1919, Ford bought out other investors in the Ford Motor Company after a legal battle. This meant that the company belonged solely to him and his family. Henry put his son Edsel in charge of the company, and then Ford bought the Lincoln Motor Company in 1922. Edsel Ford played a key role in the creation of the Lincoln Continental, a car known and loved by most Americans. By 1925, Ford delved into the products of its tri-motor airplanes. This made commercial air travel possible. Ford even went further by allowing his patented work to be used without the payment of royalties. Henry strongly believed in giving back to the society, and he did this through every means available to him, including politics. Ford was among the few persons that spoke out during the beginning of the World War I. His pacifist stance attracted a lot of criticism from the public. Henry had a lot of admirable traits. He was the first to start paying his workers up to $5 wages daily. This wage increase doubled their previous pay and catapulted them into the middle class. This pay rise allowed his workers to afford the cars they were building. He also reduced the number of work hours from 9 to 8 and created 3 work shifts in a day to replace the previous 2, which further increased production. Ford's innovation continued and led to the establishment of the new famous River Rouge factory, which became the largest in the world in only a decade. Within the Rouge complex, over 100,000 employees were hard at work by the 1930s to produce everything necessary to build a car. Steel, glass, rubber, and even lumber were all produced to make the entire process self-contained. Ford also launched its first truck using the Model T chassis pattern. The Rouge factory served as the base for the production of ambulances, tanks, and even airplane engines for the Allies in World War I. When veterans returned home from the war, Ford hired them and became the first to adjust the workplace to serve the needs of the disabled. Although tragedy struck the Ford family in 1943 when Edsel Ford died of stomach cancer, Henry was left with no other option but to resume back the company. Ford's grandson, Henry Ford II, later stepped in as head of the company in 1945. When Henry II assumed leadership, he reorganized the books and modernized the whole system for more accountability. The F-Series truck was developed under the leadership of Henry II in 1948. This truck would become the best-selling trucks in the United States. In 1954, the Thunderbird became an instant classic. In 1964, the Mustang launched the pony car segment and still holds the title of one of the fastest-selling cars in history. As part of its many business endeavors, Ford invested in Philco, which was involved in supplying mission control for the first trip to the moon. Philco also provided aids to NASA during its Apollo and Gemini missions and built satellites still used today to transmit phone calls between continents. By 1980, a non-member of the Ford family, Philip Caldwell, became the head of the Ford company for the first time. The company had been solely managed by the Ford family for over 75 years. During the next 20 years, Ford released more unique vehicles like the Taurus in 1985, the Explorer in 1990, and the Lincoln Navigator in 1998. Due to their thriving commercial status, the company was able to survive the 2008 financial crisis without needing the financial bailouts of other American automobile manufacturers. And in the last 20 years, there has been a couple of CEOs in Ford Motors. However, the company is still as innovative as it was 100 years ago. Today, Ford is leading in the automobile world when it comes to the production of self-driving technology, sustainable manufacturing, and electric vehicles like the Mustang Mach-E and Ford F-150 Lightning. Henry Ford is the perfect example of a creative mind. Anywhere automobiles are mentioned, his name will always pop up. His legacy changed the whole world. What do you think about Ford Motors and the struggles of Henry Ford? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.